Chapter 1. Before Time Began. Before the winds danced upon the surface of the deep, before the stars were hung like lanterns across the vastness of night, before a single grain of earth was shaped by the breath of the Almighty, the heavens were alive, not loud, not hurried, but alive with the quiet glory of God's presence. And in this great silence before the world began, light moved with purpose. Not the light of the sun, for the sun had not yet been spoken into being. This was a holy light, a radiance that came from within the Creator himself. And with a voice so gentle it stirred eternity, God called forth the hosts of heaven. Angels, pure, beautiful, innumerable, emerged from that divine word, each one unique, each one filled with the purpose of the one who had made them. They were not born as men are born. They did not grow as trees grow. They simply were, formed in holiness, shaped by love, alive in their obedience. They moved like flames and shone like stars. Yet they carried no pride. Their joy was in serving, in being near to the one who had breathed them into being. Among these radiant ones was one whose light bore a special weight, not heavier, not more splendid, but steadier, more deeply anchored in the will of God. His name was Michael. It means, who is like God? But at the beginning it was not just a name, it was a whisper of something holy, a question that would someday become a cry of faith. Michael was not yet a warrior. He did not yet stand with sword or command the heavenly hosts, but even in these early days, the breath of destiny seemed to rest quietly on his shoulders. He watched, he listened, he waited. And though the universe had not yet taken form, Michael already stood close to the light that would one day shape all things. The heavens were not empty. They were filled with song and purpose. And in the midst of this sacred beauty, the story of Michael, the Archangel, quietly began. Order in the realms. Above, there was no time, and yet there was order. In the vast realms of heaven, where light never faded and glory never dimmed, the angels were given their tasks. Some were messengers, swift and bright, moving across the unseen with news from the throne. Others sang, not for attention, but because praise was as natural to them as breathing is to us. And some were given the gift of watching, protecting, shielding, standing like still waters between chaos and peace. Michael's role was set apart, though no trumpet announced it. He was placed near the throne, not to glorify himself, but because his spirit held something unshakable. His faith was not loud, but it was deep. The other angels did not fear him, nor did they envy him. They honored him, though not with words. There was a quiet understanding among them that Michael was a guardian. Not because he had proven himself, not yet, but because the one who knew all things had placed something within him. His eyes were fixed on the throne. Not because he was commanded to watch, but because he longed to. There was no greater joy than to behold the glory of God. And Michael beheld it with a reverence that seemed to set his soul aglow. The others moved and sang and served, but Michael stood ready. Ready not just for action, but for surrender. For whatever the Creator would ask, he would say yes. In the stillness of eternity, this was the preparation. The realms above were not chaotic. Every movement was harmony. Every word was peace. And yet, there was something stirring, deep and far, a change that none could name. And in the order of heaven, a gentle tension began to form. Not loud, not yet. But it was coming, and Michael felt it, like a ripple on still water. But he did not fear it. He watched with the eyes of one who trusts the whisper that changed heaven among it. The angels, there was one whose beauty outshone the rest. His name was Lucifer, the light bearer. He was not evil, not at first. He was made with splendor, adorned with wisdom, gifted with a voice that could stir the stars. He stood not far from Michael. In fact, the two had once moved in similar. Light, each close to the throne, each devoted to the one who made them. But where Michael's devotion grew deeper, Lucifer's began to shift. It did not begin with rebellion. It began with a question, a quiet, subtle wonder, a reflection in the mirror of his own radiance. Was his light his own? Did his voice belong to him alone? Could he, perhaps, be more than a servant? The question did not remain his alone. It became a whisper that moved like wind through golden halls. At first, the other angels brushed it aside, but whispers can wear down stone, and over time, the harmony of heaven trembled. Michael watched it unfold with sorrow, not anger, not fear, but sorrow. He loved the peace of heaven, he loved the unity, and he had once loved Lucifer not as a rival, but as a brother. To see him turn inward, to see his light twist into something proud, it was like watching a garden wither in silence. Heaven had never known division. Now it felt the tremble of it. The whispers grew. Questions became doubts. Doubts became choices. And though no war had yet been waged, the line between loyalty and pride was being drawn, quietly, invisibly, across the hearts of angels. Michael did not argue. He did not rise. He simply stood, still, faithful, unwavering, like the mountain before the storm. His silence was not weakness. It was strength. And his strength came from one place only, the unshaken trust in God's goodness. The age of testing had begun, not through battle, but through belief. A name like a question, in the hush that came before the storm, the name of Michael was whispered again. Not as an identity, but as a question. Who is like God? It echoed not as a cry of triumph, but as a call to remember. Lucifer had asked, "Why not me?" Michael asked, in his very being, "Who is like the Lord?" One looked inward. The other looked upward. That was the difference. Not of power, but of posture. Not of strength, but of surrender. Michael did not crown himself. He did not demand loyalty. He did not rise in pride or fall in despair. He waited, and in his waiting, his purpose became clear. He would become a warrior. One day he would lead hosts of angels into battle. He would stand as the protector of God's people. His voice would be heard in visions, his presence felt in great moments of deliverance. But that day was still far off. For now, his mission was simple and holy: to remain faithful. He had already chosen his side. Not when the war began, but when the first whisper arrived. Long before the sword was forged, long before the stars fell or the serpent spoke, Michael had chosen whom he would serve. And his answer was not shouted, it was not sung, it was lived quietly, steadily, with a heart that bowed low before the throne. Who is like God? It was not just a name. It was the cry of heaven's truest servant, a name like a question, and a question that would one day become a banner in battle. But for now, it was simply whispered in the stillness as the heavens prepared for what was to come. Michael stood, waiting. Not in fear, not in pride, but in peace, and the story now stirred would unfold. Slowly, sacredly, one step at a time. Chapter 2. The War in Heaven. In the sacred stillness of eternity, where light had once flowed like rivers of joy, and songs had circled the throne without end, something had shifted. What began as a whisper now thundered through heaven. The voice of Lucifer, once the morning star, no longer bowed in worship. Instead, it rose in defiance. He who had once stood near the throne now turned his face from it, gathering others with words that promised something beyond obedience. Something that looked like freedom, but was only pride. He spoke not with fury, but with persuasion. He appealed not to darkness, but to light, to beauty, to greatness, to the desire to rise. And so, a third of the heavenly host listened. Some questioned, some hesitated, but many followed. Not because they hated the light, but because they thought they could carry it themselves. The rebellion was not born in violence, it was born in ambition, a longing to be like God, but without God, and so the heavens, once whole, became divided, not in fire at first, but in will. Angels who once sang together now looked at one another with distance. The golden halls of glory, untouched by time, now held a tension that could no longer be ignored. The stillness was broken, the harmony cracked. Michael, who had long stood in silence, saw the lines being drawn. Not with swords, not with shouts, but with choices. Obedience against defiance, humility against pride. It was not a battle of strength, but of allegiance, and in that quiet war of the heart, the war in heaven began. Lucifer did not tremble. He believed his cause was just. He believed his beauty was enough. But the light he once bore now turned against the one who gave it. And Michael, faithful, watchful Michael, stepped forward, not out of anger, not out of fear, but out of love. Love for the order God had made, love for the light that belonged only to the Creator. And so, as the heavens held their breath, the first true battle was born. Light against light, brother against brother. Glory against glory. The sword is drawn. Michael had never drawn a weapon before. His strength had always been in stillness, his power in peace. But now the balance of heaven called for something new, and so from the heart of holy fire he took up a sword, a flaming blade that burned not with vengeance, but with purity. This was no ordinary sword. It did not sear in anger. It blazed with the truth of God's order. Its flame was clear, and its edge was mercy. It was not drawn to destroy, but to cleanse. Not to punish, but to restore. In Michael's hands it glowed as though it remembered the harmony it had come to protect. He stood tall, yet bowed in heart. His face was steady, though his spirit mourned. He did not fight for glory. He did not seek victory. He simply obeyed. And in that obedience, a great light surrounded him. Not his own, but heaven's. Lucifer met him not with hesitation, but with defiance. His followers gathered behind him, not as shadows, but as once radiant beings whose hearts had turned. They were not monstrous, they were beautiful, still clothed in light, but light misused. And so the sky of eternity cracked with the cry of clashing wills. Not of blood, for angels do not bleed, but of power and loss and the ache of creation. Trying to remain whole, Michael lifted the sword. It hummed in silence, and when it moved, it did so not with rage, but with sorrow. For this was a war not to conquer, but to defend. Every strike was a plea, return, every sweep a reminder, this is not the way. But Lucifer would not turn back. His pride had taken root. And those who followed him, once full of song, now roared with voices twisted by rebellion. The battle that unfolded was not loud, though it shook the foundations of the eternal. It was not wild, though it reached to the edge of creation. It was purposeful, sacred, a war of cleansing, not chaos. And Michael, once silent, now became the sword-bearer of heaven. The fall of the morning star. There are no clocks in eternity, and yet even this war had a moment when it ended, not with a cry of triumph, not with fanfare, but with silence. A deep, aching silence that settled over the heavens like a breath held too long. The battle was over. And Lucifer, the beautiful one, the light-bearer, the singer of old songs, had fallen, not slain, for angels do not die, but cast out, removed. Like a star torn from the sky, he was hurled down, no longer glowing with heaven's fire. His name, once spoken in reverence, now trembled with sorrow. Those who had followed him fell too. A third of the heavenly host, swept away by a choice that could not be undone. They did not vanish. They remained, but changed. What had once been light was now shadow. What had once been song was now silence. Heaven watched. The faithful stood still. There was no cheering, no rejoicing, for even in victory there was mourning. The family of heaven had been torn. A piece of its beauty had been lost. Michael stood at the edge, sword lowered. He did not smile, he did not raise his hands. He bowed his head, for he knew what had been preserved and what had been lost. He had obeyed. He had defended. But he had also wept. For though Lucifer had turned, he had once been a brother. The fall of the morning star was not only the end of a rebellion, it was the beginning of sorrow. A sorrow that would echo down through creation. For the one who had fallen would not forget. He would rage, he would wander, he would seek to undo all that was still good. But for now, there was only silence. The kind of silence that comes after thunder, the kind that feels like a wound. Heaven had been cleansed, but it would never be quite the same. The wounds of heaven time passed, or something like time. Peace returned to the realms above, but it was a different peace. Not broken, but changed. The songs were sung again, but some notes felt farther away. The golden halls were lit, but the memory of darkness lingered like morning mist. A third of heaven was gone. The space they once filled now echoed with stillness. Their voices, their presence, missing. Not forgotten, but absent. And those who remained felt it, though they did not speak of it. They worshipped as before, they served as before, but they also remembered. Michael walked among them, not as a leader crowned by war, but as a servant who had stood where few could. His sword, once flaming, now rested, not discarded but honored. He did not wear victory as a robe, he wore humility. He had done what was required, not what was desired. His role had changed. He was no longer just the guardian of peace. He had become the defender of it. And with that role came a quiet strength, the kind that does not boast, the kind that watches, prays, and waits. Heaven healed slowly, the angels sang softly, and the throne remained unshaken. Michael stood before it often, not to be seen, not to be praised, but to be near. His heart was still the same, loyal, devoted, full of awe. And though he now bore the memory of battle, he also carried the peace that comes after obedience. The war in heaven was over. But the story of God's justice and mercy had only begun. The wounds would remain, but so would the hope. A hope that one day all things would be made new again. And in that hope, Michael stood, silent, steady, sacred, ready, always ready. Chapter 3. The Guardian of Israel. In a foreign land, under a sky not his own, a man knelt. His window was open toward Jerusalem, though the city lay in ruins far away. His name was Daniel. Once a boy taken captive by a conquering king, he had grown into a man of wisdom and integrity, favored even among his captors. Yet Daniel's heart had never left the land of his fathers. In the golden courts of Babylon, among strange gods and foreign customs, he remained faithful to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He fasted, prayed, and wept, not for himself, but for his people and for the promises of old. Each morning he bowed in reverence. At midday he prayed again, and when night covered the city in silence, Daniel lifted his voice a third time, sending petitions into the unseen. His prayers were not loud, but they were strong. Not desperate, but full of trust. He asked not for wealth or safety, but for mercy, for understanding, and for the restoration of his people. He prayed for Jerusalem. He prayed for Zion, and heaven listened. But Daniel's words did not pass through empty air. Beyond the veil of the physical world, something stirred. His prayers rose like incense, and with them came movement, a response from the realms above. Yet not all who stirred were holy, for in the shadows beyond human sight, powers opposed the will of God. And what Daniel could not see, heaven knew well. And so, as the faithful prophet knelt in prayer, far from home and under imperial rule, a figure stood ready, one whose presence had long been promised, though rarely seen. Michael the Archangel, the guardian, the silent protector of God's covenant people. His watch had not ended with the fall of Jerusalem. It had only deepened. And now, in exile, as Daniel sought understanding, Michael stood once more unseen, but never absent. Michael, your Prince Daniel's prayers did not go unanswered. In time, a messenger from heaven came, not in thunder, not with fire, but in a vision, gentle and true. The angel stood before Daniel with words that reached beyond time, lifting the curtain of the visible to reveal the unseen. He spoke of things great and hidden, of truths Daniel had long carried in his heart. But the angel also brought something unexpected, a confession of delay. For 21 days, the messenger said softly, I was hindered. He spoke of a struggle, not of swords and shields, but of resistance in the spiritual realms. Forces not of flesh had risen to oppose him, princes of darkness who ruled not from thrones but from shadows. These were not kings of earth, but dominions in the air, unseen rulers over Persia and beyond. And then the angel said his name. Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. It was not said with fanfare, but with gratitude. Michael had stood with him when none else could. He had broken through, made a way, lifted the burden. The messenger had not come alone. He had come because Michael, Israel's prince, had fought for the message to reach Daniel. Michael was more than a warrior now. He was a prince, not by crown or robe, but by responsibility. God had given him charge, not over nations made by men, but over a people chosen by God. Even in exile, Israel had not been forsaken. Their land was gone, their temple destroyed, but their guardian remained. To Daniel, weary with longing and worn by years of waiting, these words were life. Heaven had not forgotten. God had not turned away. And Michael, the Archangel, was still standing for them. The prince against powers. In the quiet of that vision, Daniel's understanding deepened. The wars of nations, the rise and fall of kings, were only part of the story. Beneath the surface of empires and politics, a greater battle raged, not with banners and battalions, but with powers and principalities. What Daniel saw and what Daniel knew now came together. There was a war beyond the visible. The Prince of Persia, the messenger explained, had resisted, and soon the Prince of Greece would come. These were not mortal rulers, but spiritual dominions, lords of regions not bound by geography. They sought to influence, to delay, to disrupt the purposes of God. And in that realm of resistance Michael fought, but Michael did not lead earthly armies. He did not ride through cities or speak before courts. His place was in the shadows, where battles of the soul were fought. Against the unseen dominions of darkness, he stood as Israel's defender, not just in the days of Daniel, but across generations. From the wilderness to the exile, from the Red Sea to Babylon's gate, Michael had moved, unseen and unwavering. Daniel understood now that the deliverance of his people was not merely historical, it was spiritual. Each step Israel took, each exile endured, each prayer uttered, all of it echoed through realms unseen. And Michael, God's chosen protector, had been part of it all. He did not shout. He did not boast. He simply stood against the prince of Persia, against the prince of Greece, against every force that sought to scatter what God had gathered. Michael fought, not for glory, but for covenant, for promise, for the people of God, a promise in the darkness. As the vision deepened, Daniel was shown things too vast to understand, images of sorrow and glory, days yet to come. He saw a time of great distress, unlike anything the world had known. A time when knowledge would increase and truth would be rare. A time of tribulation, of testing. And in that vision, once more, Michael appeared. At that time, the messenger said, Michael shall arise, not emerge, not awaken, but arise. For he had never left. He had always been watching, always been near. But there would come a time when his presence would be known again, when the people of God would need him in ways they had not before. He would stand not with armies of earth, but as the guardian of all who were found written in the book, not just Israel of old, but the faithful across ages. Michael would not forget them. He would not abandon them. In the time of distress, he would be there, constant, silent, sure. For Daniel, the vision was heavy, but in that heaviness was hope, a promise that even in the darkest days they would not be alone, that Michael's watch would not fail, that heaven's care extended beyond borders, beyond centuries. Michael was not a legend. He was not a figure of the past. He was a sentinel, a guardian set by God's own hand. And as kingdoms rose and fell, as empires came and went, Michael remained. Not because he was eternal, but because his faithfulness was anchored in the eternal. Daniel awoke from his vision trembling, not with fear, but with awe. He had seen what few had seen. He had glimpsed the guardian whose sword was drawn not in wrath, but in defense of promise. And though he would live out his days in exile, Daniel knew the presence of Michael was not bound by walls or time. He was the defender of God's people, yesterday, today, and until the end. Michael, the guardian of Israel, watched still, as faithful as the one who sent him. Chapter 4. The Watchers and the Nephilim. Long ago, in the age before the flood, the earth turned slowly beneath a sky untouched by storm. Humanity multiplied upon the land, and life moved with quiet rhythm. But the peace of creation was not left unshaken. For above, in the heavens, watchers looked down. These were not mortals nor creatures of flesh, but angels. Watchers, appointed to observe, to guide gently from afar. Their purpose was sacred. Their position was set. But hearts, even among the heavenly, can wander, and so in defiance of divine command, a company of these watchers descended to earth. Their feet touched soil never meant for them. Their eyes beheld women of beauty, and they took them as wives, not in holiness, but in rebellion. These unions birthed strange children, the Nephilim, mighty ones of old, men of renown, but not of righteousness. They were giants in strength, but hollow in spirit, born not of the will of God, but of trespass. With their coming, the earth groaned. The harmony between heaven and earth was broken. The watchers taught men things not meant to be known, the cutting of roots for poison, the forging of weapons for war, the summoning of shadows for power. Knowledge twisted from the stars now polluted the dust. And what had been good began to decay. The days grew darker. The hearts of humankind turned wild. The world was no longer a garden. It was a battlefield of impulse and pride. And above, heaven watched. The Holy One heard the cries of creation, rising from fields soaked in violence and from souls heavy with confusion. The balance had been broken. What had been sealed was opened. What had been set apart had now been defiled. And so the time came for heaven to respond, not in haste, but in holiness. Not with anger, but with authority. And among the host who were sent, one was chosen, for a task only he could bear. Michael is sent. When the cry of the earth rose to the courts of heaven, it was not ignored. It moved through the realms like wind through tall cedars, reaching the throne in a hush that stilled even the seraphim. The Most High gave command, and Michael, the prince, the defender, the faithful, was sent. He was not dispatched to reason, not to plead or persuade. His was not a mission of words, but of action. He came not in wrath, but in righteousness. For even judgment, when given by God, is mercy in disguise, restoring the boundaries that protect life. Michael descended, not in haste, but with calm purpose. The watchers, who had once stood tall among the heavenly host, now trembled. For they had crossed lines that cannot be uncrossed. Their gifts given by heaven had been sold for power. Their glory had become guilt. To Michael was given the authority to bind. And bind he did. The leaders of the rebellion were seized, not with cruelty, but with divine clarity. No angel resisted him, for the power of the Lord rested upon his mission. He moved through the valleys and mountains of the deep places, placing each fallen watcher into darkness. Not a darkness of absence, but of waiting. He sealed them not with iron, but with words spoken from the throne. They would remain bound until the day of their final reckoning, not erased, but held. Their time was over. Their influence ended. Michael did not gloat. He did not speak many words. His task was justice. clean, sacred, sure. The Watchers would no longer walk among men. Their knowledge, their defiance, their pride, it would go no further. The earth had cried out, and now it was heard. The skies responded, and through Michael, order returned. The chains of heaven with purpose carved by holiness, Michael completed what was required. Each watcher, once robed in brilliance, now lay sealed in the shadowed places of the world, not dead, but detained, their voices silenced, their secrets buried. These were not chains forged by human hands. They were bonds of the spirit, unseen, yet unbreakable. Heaven does not craft cages, but covenants. And so Michael's chains were woven from divine command, heavy with righteousness, light with peace. But the Nephilim, born of forbidden union, could not remain. Their presence was a wound upon the earth. Mighty they were, but might does not sanctify. Their days were numbered, their end was near. As they fell one by one, their spirits did not return to heaven. They lingered, not as angels, not as men, but as unclean shadows, restless, unrooted. These spirits born of confusion became the disembodied echoes of rebellion, troubled, troubling. They moved through places, seeking what they could never have again. A form, a voice, a place, yet, even here, Michael's work continued. Not to banish these spirits, for their time was still withheld, but to limit, to place unseen barriers. What could have become total chaos was shaped by the Archangel's hand. His presence did not erase all darkness, but it kept it from swallowing the light. Even the unclean were met with boundary. Even in judgment, mercy shaped the limits. Michael's movements carved clarity from confusion. Where the Watchers had blurred the line between heaven and earth, Michael redrew it. He did not speak often, but his silence carried weight. And the world, though wounded, began to breathe again. A cleansing flood. The time came for the waters. Not as rage, but as a deep washing, a great flood, not of punishment, but of purification. The heavens opened, the deep broke apart, and the world, that had once been filled with the noise of rebellion, now sank into silence. But Michael's part had already been fulfilled. His sword had moved through the unseen long before the waters came. His task had not been to bring the flood, but to prepare the way, to bind what needed binding, to remove what corrupted the soil. The flood was a cleansing, yes, but also a sorrow, for many were lost. Not just the wicked, but the world they had twisted. And yet, within the ark, a remnant floated, safe, preserved, the beginning of a new chapter. And though Michael was not named among the planks and beams of that vessel, his watch remained. As the rain fell, as the waters rose, as the world was covered in quiet judgment, Michael stood. Somewhere between heaven and earth he waited. His sword now sheathed, his task now complete. But his purpose unchanged. For even in the aftermath, the guardian did not rest. The same one who had stood in the courts of heaven, who had warred against Lucifer, who had defended Daniel, now stood again, not to fight, but to witness, to ensure that the new beginning was not overshadowed by the old defiance. When the rains ceased, when the ark settled, when the first dove flew, the world had been washed. Not perfect, but reset. And Michael's role endured. He had not come for vengeance. He had come to restore. And though few saw him, though his name passed like a whisper through the sacred texts, his presence was always near. In the silence after judgment, the earth breathed again, and Michael, faithful as always, kept watch. Chapter 5. The Hidden Dispute. High upon Mount Nebo, where the wind whispered softly through the crags of stone, a man stood gazing over a land he would never enter. Moses, the servant of the Lord, aged and faithful, had led the children of Israel for many years, through deserts and complaints, through manna and miracles, and now his journey neared its end. He had climbed the mountains slowly, each step weighted not by weariness alone, but by the quiet gravity of farewell. The land of promise stretched before him, green and full of promise. He saw the hills of Judah, the plains of Jericho, the distant curve of the Jordan. His eyes drank in the sight, but his feet would not touch the soil. This was not a punishment, but a closing of a chapter. Moses had fulfilled his task. There was no crowd, no farewell procession, no trumpets of men. The only witness was the wind, the rocks, and the presence of the Holy One. And there, on the mountain that met the sky, Moses breathed his last. Scripture tells us that God himself buried him in a valley unknown to man. No stone marked the spot. No monument bore his name, just silence, sacred, holy silence. But in the quiet veil that divides the seen from the unseen, something stirred. Though the prophet's body lay still, the realm of spirit was not. For even in death, Moses remained a vessel of meaning. His body, lifeless, had become the center of a hidden moment, not on earth, but in the realm where angels stand and shadows seek to twist what is holy. A dispute began, not of noise, but of intent, not for possession, but for purpose, and into this unseen moment stepped Michael. Satan demands, Michael responds. The letter of Jude, brief and veiled in mystery, reveals something few would know. There was a contention, a conflict, not of blade or battle, but of claim. Satan, the accuser, came forward. He did not seek to honor Moses. He came to demand, to possess, to twist. The one who had fallen from heaven now sought the body of a man who had walked so closely with God. But standing before him was Michael, the Archangel, calm, composed, not shaken by the presence of the adversary. He did not engage in argument. He did not wrestle in pride. There was no display of personal power, no declaration of superiority. Though he was mighty, he remained meek. Michael spoke just a few words. The Lord rebuke you, not I rebuke you, not by my strength, but simply, reverently, the Lord rebuke you. In that one sentence, Michael revealed his true strength. It was not in force, but in surrender to divine authority. It was not in defiance, but in alignment. He did not need to overpower. He needed only to stand under the covering of God's will. The accuser's challenge was silenced, not by volume, not by might, but by truth. Moses' body remained untouched by evil hands, not because Michael had overwhelmed, but because he had obeyed. His restraint was not weakness, it was reverence. In that quiet moment between the earthly and the eternal, Michael protected something more than a body. He protected the will of God. The legacy protected. Why would there be such a dispute over the body of Moses? A man, yes, but a man now departed, his spirit with the Lord. Perhaps the accuser saw an opportunity. Perhaps he longed to use the memory of Moses as a snare. For Moses was more than a leader. He was the lawgiver, the shepherd of a wandering people, the voice that had spoken with God on Sinai. To possess his remains, to raise a shrine, to provoke worship, would be to shift eyes from the Creator to the created, from the law's giver to the law's vessel. Idolatry begins not always with idols, but with remembrance twisted. But God had chosen secrecy. In life, Moses had spoken with God as a friend. In death, God alone had laid him to rest. No altar would be built. No monument would be crafted. The people would not find his tomb. They would not bow at his bones. His memory would live, but his body would be hidden, guarded, shielded from misuse. And Michael stood at the gate of that boundary. He did not guard a grave as soldiers do. He guarded a legacy. He ensured that Moses' story remained one of obedience, not worship. That his life pointed to God and not to himself. In doing this, Michael fulfilled a purpose older than time, to defend the holiness of God's design, to protect what was set apart. And so in stillness he preserved what could not be touched. No one saw this moment unfold. No eyes recorded it. No sound reached the earth. But in the silence of obedience, a legacy was guarded, and Moses, though hidden, remained honored. Not through a shrine of stone, but through the faithful presence of an unseen protector. Reverence in silence. There are moments in Scripture when silence speaks louder than words, when no noise is needed and no crowd is gathered. This was one of those moments. Michael, mighty in battle, stood still. No sword was raised, no command was shouted. He simply allowed God's justice to speak. He did not assert himself, though. He had every reason to. He did not rebuke in his own name, though he held great authority. Instead, he bowed his will to heaven's voice. This is the nature of true power: quiet, surrendered, patient. Michael's role was not to draw attention, but to direct it. Not to claim greatness, but to reveal God's glory. In an age where many seek recognition, this holy moment whispers another way. A way of reverence, a way of restraint, a way of obedience without applause. The dispute over Moses' body came and went unseen by human eyes. But its impact endures, for it shows us the sacredness of what is hidden, the strength of quiet faithfulness, the holiness of standing still when God alone must speak. Michael teaches not with sermons, but with stillness. His actions speak of devotion that does not demand credit, of a trust so deep it has no need to defend itself, of a reverence that knows when to step back so that heaven may step forward, and so the story ends not with shouts but with peace. Moses rests in mystery. Michael stands in quiet strength, and the Lord, whose will is perfect, is glorified. Chapter 6. Signs in the Heavens. There was an island where time felt slower, where waves whispered secrets to the stones and winds curled quietly through the olive trees. It was Patmos, a place of exile, far from the city's noise, far from comfort. But here, where the world had cast him aside, the disciple John found himself closer to the realm of the divine than ever before. He had been imprisoned not by chains but by silence. And in that silence, heaven opened. One day, in stillness, the veil between worlds grew thin. John, faithful and aged, eyes lifted toward the sea, was no longer looking at water or sky, but through them. A voice came like a trumpet, and in the spirit John was caught up, not in body, but in vision. What he saw was not merely a dream, but a revelation, a sacred unveiling of things to come and truths hidden since the beginning of time. In the scroll that would become the book of Revelation, John wrote what his eyes could scarcely hold. Candlesticks of gold, thrones set in heaven, creatures with wings and eyes all around. And amidst these signs and wonders, among all the imagery that stretched beyond the boundaries of speech, there stood one figure, not shrouded in mystery, but blazing with purpose. Michael. He was not a whisper in the background, nor a gentle presence in the clouds. Michael stood in command, clothed not in ornament, but in light. Not wielding weapon for the sake of wrath, but for righteousness. The vision unfolded, and once more, as in ages past, heaven stirred. The battle lines of eternity were drawn again, and Michael, Archangel of the Most High, stood not behind them, but before them. The great dragon rises in the heart of that heavenly vision. John saw more than light. He saw darkness formed into shape. A dragon, vast and terrible, with 7 crowned heads and 10 horns, tails sweeping stars from the sky. It was not just a beast of nightmare. It was a symbol, layered in truth and terror. This dragon was ancient. It was the serpent of Eden, the adversary of Job, the tempter of the wilderness, Satan, and now it had taken on the visage of empire and power. The dragon's hunger was not for food, but for dominion. It sought to devour the child born of a woman, the Christ, the promise, the Savior. It sought to usurp, to deceive, to plant thrones where none should be. But the child was caught up to God, to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness, sheltered by divine providence. Yet the dragon did not sleep. It turned its rage toward heaven itself. And in that moment, Michael rose. Not in fury, not in haste, but in divine readiness. With him came angels, not lesser by title, but burning with the same heavenly flame. Together they met the dragon and its fallen host. This was not a new war, it was a rekindling of the first rebellion. Ages ago, when Lucifer exalted himself above his place, it had been Michael who stood against him. And now, once again, the heavens became a battleground. But this time there was no allowance for return, no shadow of doubt, no whisper of uncertainty. This was final. This was sealed. Michael did not fight for ambition. He did not strike for vengeance. He fought because truth is never still when evil rises. He fought because the throne of God is not indifferent. He fought for the sake of the Lamb, for the saints, for all that was and is and will be. And as the war raged above all that was seen, the sound of swords echoed like thunder behind the stars. Cast down again, the dragon could not endure. For all its heads and crowns, for all its boasting and fury, it could not overcome what was holy. Michael stood with steadiness born of eternity. His angels pressed on, not with noise, but with the silence of unyielding obedience. Then came the fall. Not a stumble, not a retreat, but a casting down. Michael hurled the great dragon from the heights, not with hatred, but with command. Not by accident, but by decree. And the heavens shook, not with fear, but with rejoicing. The accuser of the brethren, the one who had whispered lies into every age, had been thrown down. Now, a voice declared in heaven, now have come the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Messiah. For the enemy was no longer standing in the courts above, he was cast out, silenced. The accuser had been removed from the holy places, and the Lamb stood victorious still. But with the fall came consequence. What is cast down does not disappear. It lands. And it landed on the earth. The heavens rejoiced, but the earth grew still. For though the dragon had lost his place in heaven, his fury had not diminished. He was filled with wrath, knowing his time was short. The story now turned its gaze from the heavens to the ground beneath. For the battle above had ended, but the war had reached earth. The people of God, the faithful who bore the name of Christ, were now the dragon's target. And though he could no longer accuse them before the throne, he could try to break them on earth. Yet even here, the victory of Michael echoed. The faithful were not alone. Though the enemy prowled, he was no longer enthroned. Though he spoke, he had been cast down. And that truth remained like a banner in the storm. He did not prevail. Hope for the faithful. In the days when John's vision was first written, the church was scattered and wounded. Rome ruled with iron and flame. Believers gathered in secret, prayed in shadows, and clung to the words of Christ like a ship clings to harbor in a storm. And so the vision given on Patmos was not just prophecy, it was comfort. To the early Christians, hunted and hated, John's words were more than symbols. They were promises, promises that the enemy, no matter how fierce, had already been overcome. That Michael had stood in their defense, not once, but again and again. That heaven was not silent in their suffering, and so it is still. For the story of Michael is not buried in time. It is a living reminder that we are not abandoned, that the battles we face, the ones unseen, the ones within, are not faced alone, that even when the night feels long, the hosts of heaven have not withdrawn. Michael's name means, who is like God, and his every action bears witness to that truth, that no power, no dragon, no darkness is greater than the Lord. The victory is his, the glory is his, and those who walk in faith are never forgotten. For every trial that comes like wind through, broken doors, for every tear shed in silence, for every soul that trembles beneath the weight of the world, the vision speaks hope. Hope because the dragon fell. Hope because the accuser has no voice in heaven. Hope because Michael stands still. And in the quiet of the soul, in the stillness of night, these words remain, not as noise, but as peace. You are not alone. The one who conquered watches over you still. Rest, for he is near. Chapter 7. The Voice of Restraint. In the hush of heaven, where stars are hung like lanterns above creation, there is not chaos but order, not confusion but peace. Everything in the realm of God moves with intention, from the flow of the by rivers of Eden to the quiet rustling of angelic wings. And among these heavenly beings one stands with a presence both commanding and still, the Archangel Michael. His story is not one of wrath unleashed or wild thunder shouted across eternity. Rather, his tale is written with lines of restraint. Time after time, when Michael is revealed in Scripture, he does not come to break the world, but to hold it steady. He does not arrive to destroy, but to protect. He is the guardian of boundaries, not earthly lines drawn in dust, but divine borders etched in eternal wisdom. When the children of Israel wandered, when the prophets were afraid, when the heavens themselves groaned under the weight of spiritual battle, Michael came not with overwhelming noise, but with balance. To see Michael is to see the order of heaven itself. His authority does not come from grasping, but from yielding. He does not push past the limits set by the Most High. He honors them. Where others may rush forward in the name of justice or vengeance, Michael pauses not out of fear, but out of reverence. He knows that even in battle there is a sacred rhythm, a time to act, a time to wait, a line not to cross. When he stands, he does not tremble. When he fights, he does not boast. And when he is sent, he goes, not by his own will, but by the will of God. It is this restraint that gives him strength, this submission that grants him might. For he knows that true power does not dwell in domination, but in obedience, authority without ambition. There is a quiet humility in Michael that humbles even the proudest spirit. Though he commands the armies of heaven, though he stands as chief, among angels he never speaks to elevate himself. In every account his voice is rare, and when it is heard, it echoes not his own thoughts, but the will of the one who created all things. Even in the most intense of confrontations, Michael remains a servant. The book of Jude tells of a moment when Michael contended with Satan over the body of Moses. It was a moment heavy with unseen tension, a moment where lesser beings might have spoken in rage. Yet Michael, warrior and witness, did not curse. He did not shout, he simply said, "The Lord rebuke you." That one line, quiet, clear, and complete, tells everything. Michael knew his place and he honored it. He did not assume the role of judge. He did not take what was not his to hold. Instead, he deferred to the only judge who is righteous and true. There is a holiness in that restraint, a beauty in that yielding. It reveals that authority, when stripped of pride, becomes something sacred. Michael's strength is not in the thunder of his voice, but in the silence that follows obedience. His power is not in ambition, but in alignment. He walks in the shadow of the Almighty, and it is that shadow that lights his way. In a world where strength often tries to speak over others, Michael teaches that authority speaks best when it listens first. That even in leadership, even in command, the truest honor is to serve. And so he serves without hesitation, without self, and in doing so he reflects the very heart of God, judgment and mercy. In some depictions handed down through tradition, Michael is shown holding scales, delicate instruments of weight and truth. They are not used in haste, they are not used with vengeance. Instead, they are held with care, with patience, with clarity. For Michael does not weigh with human hands. He weighs with heavenly purpose. These scales are not about measuring perfection. They are not there to find fault in weakness or shame in suffering. Rather, they reveal what already is. They uncover what is hidden. They lift the veil from the soul and lay bare the truth, not to shame, but to heal. Michael's role in judgment is not separate from God's mercy. It is woven into it. His justice is not the justice of punishment, but of revelation. He does not roar in condemnation. He does not strike to destroy. Instead, he breathes softly, slowly, and the truth is made known. Each soul weighed is not cast down by judgment, but invited upward by grace. Michael's scales do not tip in anger. They move gently, held in hands that do not forget mercy. For the one who stands with the Most High does not forget the heart of the Father, a heart that longs to restore, not reject. Michael reminds us that justice does not mean fury, and truth does not mean fear. It means seeing things as they are and offering them to the light. It means holding space for God's mercy to do what only mercy can, to redeem. And so in the quiet moments of judgment, in the unseen weighing of hearts, Michael stands not as a judge with gavel raised, but as a witness to what is eternal. A witness to the grace that still reaches, still calls, still saves. The quiet defender. If the world expects angels to be loud, fierce, or wild, it may be surprised by Michael. For though his power is vast, and though he has stood at the front of heaven's armies, he is often unseen, unheard, unrecognized by those who walk through daily life unaware. And yet he is there, like the wind that moves the trees without showing its face, like the stars that hold their path without a sound. Michael's presence is constant. His work is quiet. His defense is strong, but never boastful. He moves where he is needed, not where he is noticed. He guards not with drama, but with faithfulness. He does not need to be seen to be real. He does not need applause to remain steadfast. And because of that, the world is held in ways it does not understand. When danger comes unseen, when evil whispers where no ears are listening, Michael is already standing. When prayers are lifted in the night by those who fear they are alone, his steps echo in the spiritual places where battles are fought without earthly sound. His victories do not fill scrolls or sermons. They are written in moments, in the healing that arrives quietly, in the strength that appears in weakness, in the peace that guards a heart without explanation. Michael teaches us that protection does not always look like shields and fire. Sometimes it looks like silence, like presence, like faithfulness that does not need to speak its name. And in the end, as stars continue their courses and prayers rise like incense, Michael remains. The quiet defender, the voice of restraint, the servant of the Most High, not demanding glory, not drawing attention, only standing, only guarding, only reflecting the holy stillness of heaven. And beneath that stillness, the world sleeps, not alone, not unguarded, but held. Chapter 8. Protector of the Promised. In the stillness of holy writings, among visions and dreams, there is a figure whose presence brings not fear, but assurance. His name is Michael, a name that means, "who is like God." Yet he does not stand in the place of God, nor does he seek such glory. He stands as a servant, chosen and faithful. And in the sacred pages of both Daniel and Enoch, we find something more, a tender truth quietly tucked beneath the grandeur of prophecy. Michael is not merely an angel of war. He is a guardian, a protector assigned to a people. His charge is not vast fields or nameless masses. It is Israel, the chosen people, a nation formed not by power, but by promise, a people carried not by might, but by mercy. And to them Michael was given, not as a sword to lead their armies, but as a shield to cover them in the spiritual, places where battles cannot be seen but are deeply felt. In the book of Daniel, as visions unfold like waves upon the shore, the prophet is told of Michael's care. "Michael, your prince," the messenger says, "not a distant power, not a silent observer, but your prince, a personal guardian assigned not to watch from afar, but to walk alongside, through trials, through exile, through the deep ache of waiting." Michael's protection is not loud. It is not a flash of fire or trumpet blasts in the sky. It is persistent, steady, present even in the shadows of captivity. While Babylon's gates closed behind Daniel and lions paced in the darkness of the den, Michael remained, not to change the path, but to walk it with him. In the visions of Enoch too, Michael stands as the one who defends, not with speeches or songs, but with unwavering presence. He is not assigned to crush enemies with ease. He is assigned to a promise, and the promise is this, that God's people, no matter how scattered or small, are never without a defender. Beyond time and place, Jerusalem weeps, then rebuilds, then weeps again. Across centuries, stone by stone, the city rises, falls, and is raised once more. Its people wander, return, and are scattered again. Yet through every chapter of sorrow and renewal, there is a presence that does not fade. Michael, the protector of the promised. He does not leave when the temple crumbles. He does not abandon when the streets run quiet. He remains. Time does not bind him. The passage of kings and conquests does not shake his assignment. When Babylon marched through gates once holy, Michael stood unseen. When Persia ruled with decrees, when Greece painted its culture across Judea, when Rome raised its banners above sacred altars, Michael did not retreat. He watches not only the movement of nations, but the trembling of hearts. He sees not only history's broad strokes, but the delicate moments where faith is tested and yet held. For while empires concern themselves with might, Michael concerns himself with covenant, and the covenant is eternal. When Jerusalem was quiet, surrounded by walls too broken to protect, he was there. When Nehemiah laid brick upon brick with calloused hands and prayers, Michael's wings were near, not lifting the stones, but lifting the spirits of those who believed restoration was still possible. Even now, as years stretch across ages, as borders shift and tongues change, Michael's assignment does not expire. He remains as a quiet answer to a loud question, has God forgotten his people? And the answer, spoken not in thunder but in peace, is no. For Michael still watches, still walks, still waits. His presence is not bound to one moment or place. It is tied to promise, the kind that stretches from Abraham's first steps beneath starlit skies to the last breath of prophets who dared to believe. And in every generation that presence reminds us, God's promises are not broken by time. They are fulfilled by it. When nations fall, the rise of nations can sound like drums in the distance, loud, fierce, promising power that seems everlasting. But every kingdom of man, no matter how high it reaches, bends toward the dust. Babylon once glistened with gold and gardens, Persia with laws and order, Greece with learning and might, and Rome with empire unshaken. But all fell. One by one they crumbled, their stones scattered, their rulers forgotten. Yet through it all, Michael stood unmoved, not because he served any throne of earth, but because he served the will of heaven. His loyalty was not to Babylon's crown, nor to Caesar's robe. It was to the covenant, the unshakable word of God, spoken to a people chosen not for their strength, but for their purpose. Michael's protection was never political. He did not shift with alliances, did not kneel to earthly rulers. His sword did not rise at the call of generals, but at the command of the Most High. He was never swayed by wealth or fear or favor. His role was not to bless empire, but to guard promise. As Daniel stood before kings, as prophets wept for their nation, as believers were scattered across strange lands, Michael was there, a constant hand in a world of shifting ground. Empires crumble because they are built on man's ambition, but Michael remains because he is rooted in God's truth. His defense is not for borders, but for belief, not for monuments, but for meaning, not for buildings, but for the people who still remember God's name, even when all else is taken. In every fall of worldly power, there is a reminder that what seems great is not always good, and what seems small, a prayer, a prophet, a promise, is often what heaven holds most dear. And Michael, quiet and faithful, stands at that intersection, where kingdoms fall, but covenant stands, a hidden hand in history. There are stories we tell and stories we feel. moments in history written in books and moments felt in the soul, when something unseen holds us upright. These moments, though often missed by the world, carry the fingerprints of the divine, and within them, Michael walks. He is rarely named. He does not write himself into the pages of man's records, but his hand is there, quiet, guiding, guarding. In every tale of deliverance that cannot be explained, in every survival that should not have been, in every strength that rises when there is no strength left, there he is. Not to make life easy, not to erase suffering, but to make it sacred. Michael's presence does not promise comfort, but purpose. He walks with the faithful, not to carry them away from trouble, but to remind them they are never alone in it. A mother whispering prayers for her child in the dark. A prophet trembling before kings, a people rebuilding what had been torn down. These are not just acts of will. They are echoes of something more. The quiet presence of a defender whose name is known in heaven, though his touch on earth is gentle. He does not seek thanks. He does not wait to be noticed. Like the stars that shine even when clouds hide them, Michael's work is often hidden, but no less real. He moves not to be seen, but to serve, not to gather glory, but to guard what is holy. And so the story continues, not with loud victories or grand monuments, but with the slow unfolding of God's faithfulness across time. Through every exile, every return, through every rise, every fall, through every silence, every song, Michael is there, assigned, present, faithful, the protector of the promised. And because he stands, God's people can rest, knowing that though the road may wind, though the night may linger, the promise has not been forgotten, and neither have they. Chapter 9. Michael in the Apocrypha. Beyond the familiar scrolls of the prophets and apostles, there are writings that once whispered through the early church, like wind in an ancient grove. These texts, though not embraced by all traditions, were once read with reverence. Among them, the Book of Enoch, the Assumption of Moses, and others, Michael's story stretches with surprising clarity. Here, the Archangel does not rest in the background. He is not just a defender or warrior. He is alive in the unseen places, walking beside the faithful, commanding light against the shadows of the age. In the Book of Enoch, he is counted among the four great archangels, alongside Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. Yet Michael carries a weight that is singular. He is described as the angel of righteousness, the one who stands for the people of God, not only as a soldier, but as a counselor of heaven's order. In these writings, he acts, he speaks, he watches over Israel with diligence, intervening when the fallen angels disrupt creation's harmony. In the Assumption of Moses, he appears again, this time locked in sacred duty, contending not for glory, but for the body of the prophet. This small sacred task is more than it seems. It shows Michael's place in God's design as one who defends the resting of the faithful, even after life has ended. He is not loud, he does not claim honor, yet his presence is undeniable, reverent, and real. These lost books do not rewrite the story, they extend it. They offer quiet glimpses into the unseen rhythms of spiritual life. And Michael is there, not as a new creation, but as a faithful thread running through the tapestry of sacred tradition. He is active, he is watchful. And for the early believers, who read these words by lamplight and in hiding, Michael was a sign of divine nearness. A reminder that though many things are hidden, nothing is forgotten by God. The keeper of secrets, there are things in creation that cannot yet be spoken, paths between worlds, truths that sleep beneath the surface of time, scrolls sealed until their hour. And in the apocryphal writings, Michael is seen standing at these veiled places, not as a gatekeeper with sword raised, but as a keeper of holy silence. To Enoch, he is more than a name. He becomes a guide, not leading by explanation, but by presence. He walks with Enoch through the chambers of heaven, revealing some mysteries and gently veiling others. Not everything is to be known all at once. Some truths arrive like morning light, slow and sacred. And Michael guards the timing of these revelations. He is the one who separates the clean from the unclean, the sacred from the profane. In visions where angels weep and watchers fall, Michael remains a line between chaos and peace. He is not reckless with the mysteries. He does not shout what must be whispered. He teaches Enoch with reverence, not pride, offering visions that awaken awe but never overwhelm. In the world of the unseen, where divine secrets are kept as carefully as stars are placed in the sky, Michael is trusted. He carries the silence of God with gentleness. He holds back what must wait and reveals what must be known. His knowledge is not for control, but for protection. The mystery itself is holy, and Michael knows how to shield what is sacred from what is not yet ready to receive it. To those who seek quick answers or loud revelations, his silence may seem like absence. But for the faithful, it is a gift, for when Michael keeps a secret, it is because the fullness of God's plan is still unfolding. The hidden things are not forgotten. They are simply still becoming. Defender of souls. Even in death, God does not forget his children. In the apocryphal texts, Michael's role expands into a sacred ministry, not just of battle, but of care. He is shown as one who walks with souls, leading them gently from the weight of the world into the quiet of the eternal. He does not come with chains or fear. He comes with peace. This image of Michael as a guide for the departed, a psychopomp, does not dim his strength. It deepens it. For strength is not only in the sword, it is also in compassion. And Michael, ever obedient to the heart of God, carries souls not to judgment, but to rest. In these ancient writings, the dead are not abandoned to the void. They are noticed, accompanied, tended to by the same angel who once defended them in life. There is no break in God's care, only a passage. And Michael walks beside those who pass through it. His role is not to answer all questions or explain every mystery of eternity. It is to ensure that no soul walks alone. Even in the valley of shadow there is light, not blinding, but soft. And that light often takes the shape of Michael's presence. He defends not just bodies and nations, but hearts and hopes. He stands for those who can no longer stand for themselves. He honors their lives, carries their spirits, and places them gently before the one who sees all, knows all, and loves beyond measure. In this way, Michael is not only heaven's defender, he is heaven's escort, a guardian from beginning to end, a servant who walks beside us not only in the battles of this world, but in the silent journeys beyond it. A bridge between realms. There are places where heaven touches earth, not in storms or fire, but in stillness. These are the moments when the veil between what is seen and unseen grows thin and something holy passes through. In the apocryphal stories, Michael is such a bridge. He moves not with noise, but with grace. And where he walks, the world listens. He does not draw attention to himself. He does not demand notice, but his presence bends the very fabric of creation. Like a breath across water, he brings movement without disruption. He does not shake the world, he gently shifts it. As a bridge, Michael connects. He brings messages from God, guidance to the lost, strength to the weary. He stands between time and eternity, holding the edges of both without letting either fall. His every action reflects divine harmony, not domination, but alignment. He is the one who links heaven's intentions with earth's unfolding, not to override human freedom, but to gently guide it. He walks with prophets, stands beside saints, defends the promises that echo through generations. His influence is vast, but his footsteps are quiet. He may not be mentioned in every moment of Scripture, but in the apocryphal writings, we glimpse the threads he weaves, threads of peace, of promise, of presence. Michael does not need to be everywhere to affect everything. He stands in just the right place at the meeting point of worlds, where grace descends like dew and prayers rise like incense. And from there he watches, he waits, and when the time is right, he walks. Not to be seen, but to serve. Not to change the world by force, but to guide it by love. And in that love, the bridge holds firm, silent, sacred, eternal. Chapter 10. Symbols of the Archangel. In the soft quiet of ancient visions and sacred dreams, the image of a sword appears, not cold, not forged by human hands, but alight with something otherworldly. It burns without consuming. It gleams with a light that does not cast shadows. This is the sword of Michael, not a weapon of conquest, but a flame of truth. It is not made for destruction. Its fire is not. In scripture and story, the flaming sword is seen at Eden's gate, guarding the way back to the tree of life. And though it flashes, though it turns in every direction, it is not angry. It is pure. It is holy. It keeps sacred things from harm and falsehood. For Michael, the sword is not simply for battle. It is for cleansing. Where it is drawn, all that is hidden is made plain. Lies cannot linger near it. Darkness cannot cling to its edge. The sword shines not with human strength, but with the brilliance of God's own justice. And this justice does not roar, it reveals. Artists across centuries have tried to paint it, to shape it, to give it form. Some saw it like fire wrapped in gold, others as light so clear it hurt to look upon. But all who imagined it agreed it was not meant to harm, but to protect. It was not a tool of rage, but a symbol of righteousness. Michael does not wield it wildly. He does not raise it in pride. It is drawn only at the will of God. And when it moves with sacred purpose. Like the pillar of fire that led Israel by night, it is not a weapon of fear, but of guidance. It shows the way, it cuts through confusion, and so the flaming sword remains a sign, not of violence, but of vision. It does not burn to destroy, but to illuminate. In its flame, the truth is known, and in its light, the faithful walk without fear. The scales of mercy. Held gently in the hands of the Archangel, the scales are quiet. They do not shout. They do not sway with emotion. They wait, calm even, reflective. Unlike the sword, which shines and moves, the scales sit still, but their silence holds just as much power. Michael's scales are not for accusation. They are for clarity. They do not judge with vengeance, but with balance. In some depictions they hang in the air, suspended not by thread, but by purpose. And within them, every act, every kindness offered, every cruelty done, is placed with care. These scales are not mechanical, they are not cold, they carry the warmth of mercy. When Michael holds them, he does not do so to condemn, but to reveal. The scales do not twist justice to fit the moment. They simply reflect what is. Like a mirror held to the soul, they show without embellishment. Many imagine judgment as a fearful thing, but in the presence of Michael's scales, judgment becomes something softer, something that leads not to punishment but to restoration. For the scales of the Archangel are not held by wrath. They are held by love. In apocryphal visions and sacred art, the scales are shown at the end of days. Souls weighed gently, not harshly. A feather of truth placed on one side, a life's choices on the other. And still the scales do not accuse, they invite. They whisper that nothing is forgotten, neither the quiet acts of compassion nor the hidden wounds left by sin. But even here, Michael does not act alone. He does not speak final judgment. That belongs to God alone. Michael simply holds what is, gently letting the balance reveal its story. And in that holy balance, mercy shines. The shield and the name, not all symbols are seen in weapons or tools. Some are carved into silence. Michael's shield is one such symbol. Often imagined in sacred art as curved and luminous, it carries not an image, but a question. A question that is also his name. Quis ut Deus? Who is like God? These words are not a challenge, they are not shouted to frighten or impress. They are a humble reminder, a declaration of truth that no created being, no force of darkness, no throne or power can compare with the Lord of all. Michael's name itself is his protection. He carries no boast of his own strength. He raises no banner of personal glory. Instead, he walks into battle with a question on his lips, one that silences pride and exalts the one who reigns forever. The shield he holds is more than metal or light. It is a testimony, a symbol of submission. It reflects all that Michael is, a servant who knows his place, a warrior who fights not for himself, but for the holiness of God. And when the arrows of lies fly, when the weight of the world's injustice bears down, it is not the size of the shield that matters all. It is the name written upon it. Who is like God? The answer resounds not in words, but in silence. For there is none. None like him. Michael's shield does not invite fear. It invites faith. It reminds all who see it, in art, in vision, in quiet prayer, that the victory belongs not to the strong, but to the surrendered. Colors of light. In sacred paintings and whispered visions, Michael is surrounded not only by light, but by color, rich, meaningful, divine. These are not colors chosen by fashion or tradition. They are colors with purpose, soaked in the language of heaven, red like flame. Not the red of anger, but of sacrifice. It speaks of love poured out, of courage that burns not to harm, but to protect. Around Michael, red flickers like the first light of dawn, reminding us that to defend the holy is to give one's heart. Gold like morning sunlight on polished stone. The color of kings and temples, of crowns and glory. But in Michael's presence it shines not for status, but for sanctity. Gold marks him as one set apart, not for domination, but for devotion. It tells of a calling that cannot be bought or broken, and sapphire blue, deep, still, eternal. The color of the sky stretched over Eden, of the sea that reflects the heavens. It speaks of peace, of calm that does not shake in battle, of clarity that does not waver in trial. Around Michael, this blue gathers like a cloak, not to hide, but to comfort. Together, these colors do not clamor, they do not blind, they soothe, they speak a quiet language, one of reverence and awe. And those who gaze upon these colors, in sacred spaces, those who pray before images painted with these hues, find not fear, but stillness. Michael does not shine to intimidate. He shines to inspire. His colors are not loud, but full. They echo with the voice of God, not spoken in thunder, but whispered in beauty. And in that beauty the heart remembers. Holiness is not always fire. Sometimes it is color. And so he stands surrounded by these sacred shades, holding a sword that purifies, scales that restore, a shield that humbles, and a name that reminds. He is not the loudest in heaven, but he is faithful. And in the quiet light that surrounds him, eternity draws near. Chapter 11. Michael across the faiths. In the sacred writings of the Jewish tradition, there is a presence that stands quietly but powerfully beside the people of Israel, a guardian not made of flesh, but of divine light. His name is Michael, and though he does not speak often in the texts, his presence is felt like a protective breath across the history of a people who have known exile, return, silence, and song. In the Talmud and the Midrashic commentaries, Michael is named again. And again, he is not distant, he is close. Not a vague idea, but a faithful defender. The rabbis describe him as the great advocate, the heavenly intercessor who pleads for Israel before the throne of God. He is not angry or vengeful, he is merciful. A warrior, yes, But his weapon is not rage. It is loyalty. Michael does not abandon his post. When Israel weeps, he is there. When they rise in joy, he is near. In mystical texts, especially in the literature of the Kabbalah, he is said to stand on the right side of God's throne, the side of loving kindness. He defends not only against outward forces, but also against spiritual imbalance. His very presence brings order. His presence affirms that no matter what earthly kings may decree, the people of God are not alone. It is in Daniel 2 that we see Michael called your prince, speaking of Israel's own. Not a general for many nations, but a guardian for one, assigned, appointed, steadfast. And though Jewish belief does not dwell heavily on angels as intermediaries, Michael is remembered as a figure of deep spiritual responsibility. He is not glorified for himself. He points upward always. He does not act without divine instruction, but when he moves, it is always on behalf of the people he was given to guard. He is not their hope, God is, but he is their helper, and that help is constant, quiet, and pure. Captain of heaven, Christianity. In the Christian tradition, Michael rises from guardian to general. Still gentle, still submitted, but now with a sword of light drawn against the powers of darkness. In the book of Revelation, his title is clear: Michael the Archangel, leader of the heavenly hosts, defender of the faithful. He does not fight for ambition. He does not stand for glory. Instead, he contends with the dragon, a symbol of Satan, pride, and deceit. Michael's voice is rarely heard, yet his presence resounds across the most sacred battle in Scripture. He casts the enemy from heaven, not with his own authority, but with the might of the one who sent him. But beyond the battlefield, Christian history and art portray Michael as more than a warrior. In cathedrals and ancient icons, he is seen gently weighing souls with his golden scales, not as judge, for that belongs to God alone, but as one who assists in the holy revealing of truth. He is a companion in death, gently guiding the faithful from this life to the next. Across the centuries, churches and shrines were raised in his name. From the heights of Mont Saint-Michel in France to the quiet chapels scattered across the mountains of Ethiopia, believers honored him not as a god, but as a servant who carried divine strength. Michael's name became a prayer. St. Michael, defend us in battle, not to deliver earthly victories, but to guard the soul, to remind the church that evil is real, but it is not eternal, that darkness exists, but it is not greater than light. In Christianity, Michael the Archangel never becomes the center. Christ alone is, yet Michael is cherished, not for his power, but for his posture. Always kneeling, always serving, always standing when the call comes to protect what is holy. The Angel of Mercy, Islam. In Islam, too, Michael is known. His name is Michael, and though his story differs, the light around him remains. He does not carry a sword. He does not lead armies, yet his role is vital, one of peace, provision, and divine compassion. According to Islamic tradition, Michael is the angel who brings rain from the skies. He nourishes the earth, sustains the crops, and helps souls to grow by sustaining the body. He is the one through whom God's mercy flows. Quiet, constant, life-giving. Where Gabriel is the messenger who delivers revelation, Michael is the one who delivers sustenance. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, spoke of him with reverence. When he stood to pray, he would seek guidance from both Jibril, Gabriel, and Michael. Not because they were divine, but because they were trusted by the most merciful. Islam teaches that angels do not act of their own will. They are pure, obedient, sinless. And Michael, among the greatest, fulfills his role without pride. He does not seek worship or praise. He does what he was made to do, to serve. While he does not appear as often in Islamic scripture as in the Bible, his presence is honored. In the unseen world that the Quran affirms, Michael is a bearer of peace. And the rain he brings is not just water, it is a symbol of mercy descending, of sustenance given without demand. He is not the Archangel of fire, but of life. And, though he does not speak in verses or appear in visions of battle, he is remembered with love. For every green leaf, every harvest, every drop of water is touched by his unseen hand. A shared hope. Though the faiths differ in story and form, they meet quietly in meaning. Across Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, Michael, or Michael, remains a figure of holy presence, not a god, not a savior, but a servant who points to something higher. He does not ask for attention. He does not need it. His light shines without demanding the spotlight. And in each tradition, that light reflects something sacred: protection, provision, mercy, and truth. He is a shared hope, spoken of in different tongues, seen in different ways, yet always familiar, always faithful. For the people of Israel, he is a guardian prince. For the Christian church, a captain of the hosts. For Muslims, an angel of divine mercy. And for all, he is a reminder that God sees, that heaven moves, that no prayer is forgotten. His story, woven across centuries and continents, is not one of dominance, but of unity. Not of force, but of faithfulness. In a world often divided by creed, Michael's name speaks softly, reminding us that the divine does not play favorites, but offers protection, love, and mercy to all who seek him. He is not bound by place. He is not limited by time. He walks through the pages of holy books and across the memories of countless generations, always serving, always guarding, always reflecting the heart of the one who is above all. And in that quiet work, unseen by many but deeply felt, Michael remains. A symbol not of separation, but of connection. A silent hymn across the world's great religions. A whisper that says, "You are not alone. The light walks with you." Chapter 12. Shrines and Mountains. There are places on earth where the veil between heaven and creation feels thinner, where the air feels older, holier. One such place lies in the mountains of southern Italy, nestled quietly in the Gargano Peninsula. There, within a limestone hill, a cave once hidden became a holy site. Not because of what was found, but because of who appeared. Long ago, a shepherd searched for his lost bull. The sun had set softly behind the hills, and the fields were quiet. His animal had wandered far, disappearing into the wooded slopes. The man followed its trail until he came upon a cave, wide, shadowed, and still. Inside he saw what no man could forget, his bull kneeling, calm, unafraid, as if it recognized something sacred within the stone. The shepherd, confused and concerned, aimed his arrow toward the creature, to scare it out. But as the arrow flew, it turned in the air. It reversed course. It struck the man himself, not in fury, but in message. Something greater was present, something unseen. Soon after, a vision came. Not in thunder, but in the silence of night. It was Michael, radiant, calm, commanding in peace. He spoke not with riddles, but with clarity. This cave, he said, was already consecrated. No need for hammers, no need for fire. The earth had prepared this altar, and so it began. The sacred cave of Monte Sant'Angelo, a place where feet have walked for over 1,000 years. Popes came, kings knelt, pilgrims climbed, yet none owned the cave, for it belonged not to man, but to heaven. Within its walls, smooth and ancient, echoes still linger, not of voices, but of reverence. Candles burn where sunlight cannot reach, and in the air there is a hush, the kind of stillness that reminds the heart that angels once walked this place and still may walk again. Mont Saint-Michel far to the northwest, where the sea meets the sky in shifting tides, another sacred place rises. Off the coast of Normandy, France, an island appears and disappears with the moon. It is a mountain of stone, crowned with spires, surrounded by water that moves like breath. This is Mont Saint-Michel, one of the most beloved sanctuaries ever. Built in Michael's name, the story begins with dreams. In the year 708, the Bishop of Avranches, Aubert, slept, and in his sleep he saw the Archangel. Michael appeared, clear and insistent, asking that a church be built atop the rocky island. Aubert, unsure, dismissed the dream, but it returned, again and again. And on the final night, the vision was so powerful, so unmistakable, that it left a mark, a touch upon the bishop's skull. The sanctuary was begun. Stones were hauled across shifting sand. Builders toiled as tides rose and fell. And over the years, the island transformed. What had been a barren mount became a place of prayer, a fortress of faith, a monastery where the winds carried whispers of scripture, and where pilgrims walked not just to seek, but to be still. Mont Saint-Michel became more than a building. It became a symbol, a place between land and sea, between heaven and earth. When storms crashed against its sides, the sanctuary stood. When wars scarred the world around it, the bells still rang. Even now travelers make their way there. Some across ancient paths, others across modern bridges, and when they climb the winding stairs, when they step into the chapel that touches the sky, they are met not with spectacle but with peace. Here, Michael is not imagined in battle. He is present in silence, in stone warmed by sun. in arches that lift the eye upward, and in the quiet certainty that even in an ever-changing world, some places still hold the light of angels. The high places all across Europe, from the warm hills of southern Italy to the cool ridges of the British Isles, there is a pattern, gentle but persistent. Shrines dedicated to Michael appear on mountains, cliffs, and sacred peaks, always high, always looking skyward. These are the high places, altars not built in valleys but lifted toward the heavens. There is a reason. Michael the Archangel, who stands between realms, is honored where earth stretches up. These high places are not about altitude, but attitude. They mirror Michael's role, a bridge, a sentinel, standing at the edge between what is seen and what is not. The sanctuary of Skellig, Michael, off the coast of Ireland, rests on stone that seems to rise straight out of the sea. It is remote, windswept and beautiful. Monks once lived there, carving steps into rock, praying in the cold, trusting in grace. The mount became their monastery, and Michael their guardian. In Greece, the monastery of Panormitis on the island of Symi honors the Archangel not with towers, but with a bay, a calm stretch of sea where Michael is believed to have appeared, offering comfort to sailors. Pilgrims still leave small metal tokens, images of boats, limbs, prayers, asking for protection. In Cornwall, England, St. Michael's Mount rises from the sea like its Norman counterpart, and in Spain, the sacred site of Monte Gargano echoes the Italian shrine with its own cave of light. Each of these places whispers the same truth, that those who walk the narrow paths, who climb the high hills, who pause in the quiet of great heights, are met not with emptiness, but with presence. Michael may not speak aloud, but his peace is there. The high places do not promise easy passage. They promise a view, a glimpse of heaven's nearness. And in that glimpse, the soul remembers. Some things are worth the climb, the path of light. Among all the stories and sights, there is one legend that stretches not across time, but across land. A line drawn from Ireland to Israel, traced by pilgrims and dreamers alike. It is called the Sword of St. Michael, a mysterious alignment of shrines built in his honor. From Skellig Michael in the Atlantic, through Mont Saint-Michel in France, to Sacra di San Michele in Italy, and onward to Mount Carmel and the Holy Land, the line continues, as if guided by a single stroke of divine intention. Each shrine sits along this path. Each one stands in silence, unaware of the others, yet together they form a pattern too precise to ignore. Some say it marks the blow that Michael struck against the dragon, a sword of light cleaving darkness. Others say it is a message that good walks the earth and leaves signs. Whether at miracle or mystery, the path inspires. Not every pilgrim walks its full length, but each who visits even one of these shrines becomes part of something larger. A story told in stone and sky, a path of light that stretches across nations, across hearts, and perhaps that is Michael's way. Not to overwhelm, but to invite. To stand not in one place, but to echo through many. To guide, not with force, but with presence. a light that doesn't blind, but that never goes out. So the shrines remain: the cave, the mount, the hill, the path, holy places not because of their height or age, but because of the one who once appeared, the one who still watches, and the angel who stands between, always faithful, always near. Chapter 13. The Miracles of Michael. There are stories told not to impress, but to remind. Stories whispered through stone corridors and written softly in candlelight. In the hills of southern Italy, one such story has passed from generation to generation, not as legend, but as something sacred. It begins with a bull, a cave, and a man who did not understand what he was standing before. The man was a shepherd. His life was quiet and earthy, filled with the rhythms of grazing, flocks and open skies. One day, his finest bull went missing. He searched the pastures and followed the wooded trails, calling out into the silence. Finally, he came upon a cave, large, cool, hidden in the folds of Monte Gargano. There, in the shadows, stood his bull. But it was not wandering. It was kneeling, as if drawn by something unseen. Frustrated, the shepherd raised his bow. He aimed not in anger, but in confusion, hoping to startle the creature from its place. The arrow flew straight and fast, but something strange happened. Before it reached the bull, it turned mid-air. The flight twisted, and the arrow came back, striking the shepherd himself. Wounded and frightened, he stumbled home and told the townspeople. The people of Siponto were troubled. What kind of place could cause such a thing? They gathered to pray. Their bishop, a man of devotion and humility, sought guidance with fasting and supplication. And then came the vision. In the silence of prayer, a figure appeared, cloaked in light, calm as dawn. It was Michael, the Archangel. His voice did not thunder, it soothed. The cave, he said, was already consecrated. It needed no altar, for heaven had already touched it. He declared it holy. From that day the cave was never the same. People came not to conquer it, but to kneel. Not to build upon it, but to listen within it. And so the first miracle was not the arrow that turned, but the heart that did. The miracle was not the wound, but the invitation. An invitation to recognize the sacred where it had always been, in stone, in silence, in surrender. The healing waters. Not long after the cave was honored, something else appeared. Something soft, something clear. A spring began to flow from within the cave's cool walls. At first, it was simple, just water. But when the faithful prayed over it, when hands cupped it with reverence, something changed. The water, touched by heaven's mercy, began to heal. Stories emerged, quiet and sincere. A man blinded by years of sorrow stepped into the light again. A child, frail and without strength, drank and began to stand. Mothers brought cloth to soak. Fathers brought hope wrapped in silence. No loud proclamations, no performances, just quiet restoration. The spring did not rush. It trickled. It did not announce itself. It simply flowed. And in its gentle current, burdens began to lift. not always in body, but often in spirit. The healing was not just for illness, but for the weary. Michael was never seen touching the water, but his presence was felt in the stillness, in the softness, in the way peace settled into the hearts of those who came. He was not the one who healed. That belongs to God alone. But he stood nearby, a witness, a comforter, a presence that reminded each pilgrim, you are not forgotten. Even now in that same cave, the spring continues. Pilgrims still come, not because of stories from long ago, but because something sacred remains. Bottles are filled, prayers whispered, and always the water moves. Quiet, constant, clean. A symbol of grace that does not force, but flows. Visions in the night. Not every miracle is seen in daylight. Some arrive in sleep. In the space where the soul softens and the noise of the world falls away, many have seen him. A figure radiant, cloaked in peace, standing in silence or speaking with words made of light. In the villages near the sacred cave and in places far beyond, people began to speak of dreams. Some saw Michael warning of coming trials, urging prayer, calling for repentance. Others saw him offering comfort, reminding them they were loved, protected, seen. These visions were not loud. They did not demand attention. They came in the softest hours when the heart is most open. For some, the dream changed everything. A woman who had walked in bitterness for years woke with tears and began to forgive. A man carrying guilt beyond measure dreamed of Michael standing near, hand raised, not to judge, but to lift. Other times, the dreams led to action. Shrines were built where visions appeared. Quiet paths became places of pilgrimage. Fields once forgotten became places where candles were lit, where prayers rose like breath. Yet Michael did not come to be worshipped. His messages always pointed away from himself, toward God, toward love, toward surrender. The dreams he brought were not distractions. They were reminders. Reminders that heaven is not far, that angels walk unseen, that even in our sleep, we are not abandoned. The miracles of vision did not promise an easy life, but they offered a quiet hand, a whisper in the night that said, you are held, you are known, you are not alone. The light that guides. Again and again, across centuries and continents, those who speak of Michael speak of light. Not the blinding light of judgment, but the warm, gentle glow of guidance. A light that does not force you forward, but shows you the way. Some have seen it in their homes, a soft glow in a dark room with no source but peace. Others, on mountain paths, have seen flickers that led them safely through fog and shadow. In churches built in his honor, candles sometimes seem to burn brighter, longer, as if held by unseen hands. The stories differ, but the feeling is the same. The light does not frighten, it calms, it does not rush, it waits. It appears when it is most needed. When fear tightens the chest, when the road ahead is unclear, when hope seems like a distant star. Michael's light is not about spectacle. It is about presence, It glows in silence. It stays just long enough to help, then fades, leaving behind a heart that has been steadied. In one story, a traveler lost in a forest saw a golden thread of light winding through the trees. He followed it and found his way home. In another, a mother praying by her child's bed saw a soft radiance fill the room, and the fever broke. These are not loud miracles, but they are true. They are the kind that do not need explanation, only gratitude. Michael does not bring the light because he is the source. He brings it because he knows the source, and that light, warm, guiding, faithful, is the same light that has led people since the beginning. Through wilderness, through fear, through shadow, even now, the light still comes. In prayer, in quiet moments, in ways too gentle to measure. And when it does, it says only this: you are guided, you are loved, and there is always light, even in the night. Chapter 14, Michael and the Children of God. In every age, through every land, there have been moments when children have been caught, not by hands seen, but by something invisible, something kind. Moments where danger passed just inches away, where tragedy loomed close but did not strike. And in these moments, quiet stories begin to grow, stories that speak of a guardian not of this world, a protector whose wings are unseen but whose presence leaves no doubt. His name is Michael. He is known in Scripture as the Archangel who commands heavenly armies, the prince who stands for God's people. Yet alongside this mighty image, another truth quietly shines. Michael is also the guardian of the small, the unnoticed, the fragile, especially the children. Not because they are weak, but because they are precious. In the hills of old villages and the winding alleys of ancient cities, tales have been whispered from parent to child, of a child nearly swept away by river currents but lifted gently to shore, of one who stood unharmed beneath falling stones, of another who wandered into the woods but returned safe, claiming a man in light had led them home. These are not tales of chance. They are not meant to impress. They are meant to remember. Michael does not stand over thrones. He kneels beside cradles. He walks beside tiny feet, guiding through danger, comforting in the dark. He is not a distant figure of thunder and flame, but a quiet shield around those who trust without knowing, who believe without needing proof. Even in Scripture, though not often detailed, the heart of God toward children is always clear, and Michael, as a servant of that heart, follows with joy. He protects not only the body, but the wonder, the light of childhood that reflects heaven's own joy. Wherever there is a child crying out in the night, afraid of storms or silence, Michael may be nearer than we think, not to erase all fear, but to hold it gently, to stand watch, to remind even the smallest soul, you are not alone, you are not forgotten, you are loved. Dreams and comfort. Children sleep with hearts wide open. In their dreams, the world is not bound by walls or rules. They walk with lions, they fly with wings, they speak to stars. And sometimes, in those dreams, an angel visits. Radiant and still, speaking without sound, glowing softly in a corner, where shadow once lingered. Many children speak of these moments. A figure in gold at the end of the bed. A soft voice whispering, "Do not be afraid." A warmth in the room when fear should have ruled. Parents may smile, dismiss it as imagination, but imagination is often the first door heaven knocks on. Michael's comfort comes gently, not in long sermons or mighty signs, but in wonder. A light that stays until the child falls asleep. A whisper that calms without needing to be understood. A dream that lingers not in the mind but in the heart, leaving behind peace like dew on morning grass. These moments are often forgotten by the grown, not because they are untrue, but because the world teaches us to doubt what we cannot explain, yet the child remembers. Not always in words, but in the quiet courage that grows after the dream. Michael's touch is not always healing, not always rescuing. Sometimes it is simply staying, sitting in the room when the dark seems too deep, keeping watch when nightmares creep near, letting the child know that even when eyes are closed, heaven is awake. There are stories of children who walked through fire, through storms, through sickness, and later said, "I saw a man made of light. He told me I'd be okay." These stories do not boast. They simply bear witness. Michael's comfort does not demand to be noticed. It simply stays as sure as the morning. In a world filled with noise, his gift is quiet, a sacred hush that holds space for healing, for safety, for rest. Teaching by presence, Michael is not a teacher in the way we often expect. He does not arrive with scrolls or lectures. His voice is rarely recorded, but his lessons are deep, carved into the heart through presence alone. He teaches not by explaining, but by being. When the storm comes and all feels unsure, Michael does not always calm the winds. Sometimes he simply walks beside us through it. In doing so, he teaches that courage is not loud. It does not boast or rage. It watches. It stands. It stays. For children, and for those who carry childlike faith, this kind of teaching matters. It does not need to be understood to be received. A child knows when someone is near. They feel it before they can explain it. Michael's presence says it is enough to be here. It says you are safe even if nothing else makes sense. His lessons are not printed in ink, but written in peace. The kind that comes not from answers, but from being known. In times of fear, when a child cannot find words, Michael teaches with stillness. When a loved one is sick and no one knows what to say, he teaches with silence. When a door is closed and a prayer seems unanswered, he teaches with nearness. This kind of teaching does not fade. It stays in the soul long after the moment passes. It becomes the reason a child learns to pray. The reason an adult, years later, still believes that angels are real. Michael does not need to speak to teach. His very being says what hearts need most to hear. You are not walking this road alone. A cloak over the fragile. In a world where safety feels rare and certainty flickers like a candle in the wind, the image of a protector is not just comforting. It is sacred, and for the fragile, for children, for the sick, for the sorrowful. Michael's presence feels like a cloak of light, not to hide, but to shield, not to smother, but to warm. Imagine a child curled beneath a blanket on a stormy night. The thunder rolls, the wind howls, but they are wrapped in something soft, something secure. Michael's care is like that. It covers the soul in moments when the body feels small and the heart feels overwhelmed. Not every pain is taken away, not every fear disappears, but under his cloak, those fears lose their power. They shrink beside the steady glow of love that does not falter. For the broken-hearted, those whose dreams have shattered, whose losses are deep, Michael offers this same covering. Not to fix what is lost, but to hold what remains. To wrap the soul in peace when the mind cannot understand, and for those who feel forgotten, who wonder if heaven has grown quiet, Michael's light says otherwise. It says, you are remembered, you are seen, even if the world overlooks you, even if no one else understands. His cloak does not glitter. It is not heavy or grand. It feels like warmth, like light, like peace. When all else is uncertain, when the night is long and the path unclear, Michael does not always part the sea, but he always walks beside, he always covers the fragile. And in that covering, he leaves a promise that nothing can separate us from the love that watches over us. In the hush of bedtime, in the heart of prayer, in the softness of sleep, this is what Michael offers. A presence, a peace, a cloak over the fragile, and in that holy covering, we rest, safe, loved, and never alone. Chapter 15. Spiritual Warfare and the Modern Heart. There are no dragons outside our windows, no flaming swords drawn above city skylines, no chariots of fire storming across the night sky. And yet, the battle continues. Not in ancient fields of stone, but deep within, in the quiet chambers of the heart, in the unseen places of the soul. Today's battles wear different faces. They come as fear in the early hours before dawn. They arrive as temptation dressed in comfort, or confusion masked as truth. They whisper in thoughts that question worth, stir anger, or dull hope. We do not face armies as Daniel once did. We face ourselves, our thoughts, our choices, our doubts. But though the battlefield has changed, the warrior has not. Michael still fights, not with loud arrival, but with faithful presence, not with the shout of command, but with the steadiness of support. He does not barge into the heart uninvited. He waits, patient, ready. He is not the hero of our stories, but the one who helps us stand. When the mind is clouded and the heart weary, Michael's presence draws close like a steady hand on the shoulder. Not controlling, but comforting. Not rushing in, but reminding us. We are not alone in our inner battles. There are moments when the right choice feels too hard, when bitterness grows, or when fear wraps itself around peace. In these moments, Michael stands nearby. He does not take the fight from us, but he surrounds it with light. A quiet strength, a shield we cannot always see, but can deeply feel. This is spiritual warfare in its most intimate form. Not thunder and fire, but stillness and surrender. The unseen clash between despair and faith, anxiety and trust, shadow and light. And Michael, the Archangel, continues his watch, not above us, but beside us, not beyond reach, but ever near. The famous prayer. There are words that linger long after they are spoken, words that become a part of us, whispered in fear, repeated in habit, offered in hope. One such prayer begins with the name of the One who stands at the gates of every storm. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. It is a prayer known across generations, across languages, across hearts. It was written not during a time of peace, but after a troubling vision, a moment when the world felt unsteady, when evil felt too near. In the year 1886, Pope Leo XIII composed the prayer after reportedly seeing, in a moment of spiritual clarity, the shadow of darkness attempting to rise. And in response, he called upon Michael, not as myth, but as messenger, not as legend, but as help. The prayer is not long, yet each line is a reminder that the battle is real, that we do not stand alone, that there is more than we can see. Defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. These are not the words of helplessness, but of trust. They are not charms or spells. They are declarations that heaven fights with us, that angels answer when called. Many whisper these lines before sleep. Others say them in fear when a moment turns heavy or the heart feels unsure. In churches, they echo after Mass. In homes, they rise like incense from lips that need reassurance. This prayer is not about summoning power. It is about remembering it. The prayer does not force Michael to act. It invites him. It does not give him orders. It joins him in the work of light. And so the prayer continues across time, a small flame carried from soul to soul, a quiet sword drawn not from rage but from reverence, not magic, mercy, not superstition, surrender. A way of saying we are not alone in this battle. Heaven stands with us. How angels move. We often look for signs that flash. We expect answers that shout. We wait for something loud enough to silence doubt, clear enough to explain everything. But heaven's language is gentler, and angels, especially Michael, rarely move in noise. Their steps are quieter than wind. Their help often comes not as a miracle, but as a shift, a subtle change in thought, a moment of unexpected peace, a pause before a poor decision. Michael does not often tear open the sky. He opens the path within. Perhaps you've felt it, that sudden sense to pause before speaking harshly. That moment when you change your route and find safety. The door that closes, disappointing at first, but later proves to be mercy. The gentle nudge to forgive. The deep breath that comes right before surrender. These are not coincidences. They are alignment. They are angels at work, not forcing life to bend, but nudging the soul to see differently. Michael does not barge into hearts. He waits at the edge. He watches with a love that is not passive, but patient. He moves not to overwhelm, but to realign, to guide gently back to the will of God. In a world filled with distractions and noise, we often miss these movements, but they are there. Small redirections, sudden clarity, an unexpected calm, a word of scripture remembered at just the right time. Angels do not need to speak in thunder to be heard. Sometimes their greatest work is done in silence, not in grand gestures, but in the return of a heart to the one who made it. Michael's warfare is not about winning in the way the world understands. It's about restoring order, recentering love, returning to light, and every quiet shift within is part of that holy battle, our silent companion. There are moments in life that pass quietly yet carry great weight. A near miss on the road, a fear calmed without explanation, a tear that falls in prayer, followed by peace that cannot be named. These are the moments that linger, the ones we do not fully understand. And perhaps in these moments, Michael walks with us, not to claim credit, not to be seen, but to stay near, and especially when we don't know we need him. He is not a companion who speaks often, but he is never absent. He does not need applause. He does not need acknowledgement. He simply stays. In hospital rooms where breath grows slow. In classrooms where a child feels unseen. In battlefields of the mind where anxiety or grief tightens its grip. In all these places, Michael is present. Not loudly, but faithfully. Sometimes he defends in ways we notice, a protection we can name, but often his defense is unseen, guarding the heart from despair, covering the soul in prayer, lifting burdens too heavy to speak aloud. He is a friend of the weary, a companion to the unnoticed, a guardian of the quiet, faithful. And when life feels too heavy, when words run out, when prayer becomes a sigh, Michael is there, not to fix, but to hold, not to dazzle, but to defend. He is not far, he walks beside us, in silence, in light, in love. And so when we do not see dragons, when swords do not flash, when help does not come in ways we expect, let us remember that the battle is still being fought, and the Archangel still stands, not far above but here, with us, within us, beside us, a silent companion in the quiet war, a faithful friend in the journey toward peace. Chapter 16. Michael at the End of Days. There is a hush in the heavens, a silence that holds its breath, as if all creation waits for something sacred to begin. The stars do not twinkle, the winds do not stir. Instead, a great stillness falls, as though even time bows in reverence. In the heart of that stillness, a sound begins to rise, not from earth, not from man, but from above. A trumpet, ancient and pure, rings out across the skies. Its sound is not harsh, but clear, like light turned into music. It is the trumpet of revelation, a signal that the end is near and the fullness of God's promise is at hand. Though his name is not spoken in every passage, the shadow of Michael is there, quiet but unmistakable. In the book of Revelation it is written that the heavens open and 7 trumpets are sounded, each one marking a divine turning point. And though chaos stirs below, there is one who watches with unwavering calm. He is not shaken by the storms, for he has known from the beginning that the end is not an ending at all, Abby, but a revealing, a return, a reckoning. Michael the Archangel stands where earth meets eternity. He does not rush, for he has stood watch through every age. He does not tremble, for he has seen the fullness of both darkness and glory. In his hand, unseen yet steady, are the scales of God's justice. And beside him lies the great book, the book of life, where names are not scribbled hastily, but written with purpose, with promise. Each soul whose name appears there has not been forgotten. They are known, they are remembered, and as the trumpet calls out, it is not a sound of fear, but of fulfillment. The time has come. The dividing line has been drawn, not in cruelty, but in clarity. Michael does not pass judgment. He only stands at the gate, holy and unshaken, ensuring that what has been written is now fulfilled. The earth groans, the skies shudder, but Michael remains. A sentinel between worlds, ushering in the final hour with peace, not panic. For he knows the one who holds all things, and he knows that in the end, mercy will triumph over fear. The last war from the beginning, the enemy has whispered lies. In gardens, in hearts, in kingdoms fallen and rising again. But Michael has never once forgotten the truth. And now, at the end of days, that truth takes form once more, a final battle, not waged in uncertainty, but in divine completion. The dragon rises fierce and defiant, just as he has before. His wings blot out the sky, and his breath fills the air with dread. But the heavens do not tremble, the armies of light do not falter. And Michael, who once cast him down, steps forward once more, not with haste, not with fear, but with a calm that shakes the very bones of evil. This is not a war of equals. It never was. The outcome is not a question, it is a confirmation. Michael fights not because he wonders what will happen, he fights because it is already written. The dragon may roar, but it is a sound empty of victory. He is a shadow pretending to be fire, a lie pretending to be truth. Michael does not raise his sword in anger, but in completion. Each movement is purposeful, each strike a fulfillment of a promise. He does not need to rage, for righteousness does not require rage. It only requires light. And light, once it shines, cannot be overcome. The final clash is not drawn out. There is no struggle that lingers in the heavens. With holy certainty, Michael ends what was always destined to fall. The enemy, whose voice once deceived the stars, is silenced, not by violence, but by justice. And then, when the last cry of darkness fades, there is a great quiet. A peace that flows down like golden rivers from the throne of God. Michael does not raise his arms in triumph, he simply lowers his sword. The battle is not his to celebrate. It was never about him. It was about restoring the order of the heavens, and now, at last, that order has been restored. The resurrection guard, long before the final trumpet, long before the dragon rose for the last time, the prophet Daniel saw a vision of graves opening and dust stirring, of those who slept in the earth rising to new life. And in that vision, Michael stood, not as a warrior, but as a guardian, as one who waited. He does not fear the silence of the tombs. He has stood near them for generations. He has watched over the sleeping faithful, not as a distant protector, but as one who knows their names. And now, as the dawn of resurrection draws near, he stands again, at the edge of eternity, near the fields where bones shall bloom. It is not a moment of noise. There are no drums, no rushing of feet, just the sound of wind passing over old stones, but then a stirring, a shift. Dust gives way to breath, silence gives way to song. The faithful rise, their eyes no longer bound by death, their hearts no longer chained to sorrow, and Michael is there, watching, waiting, not commanding, not shouting, but present. His presence is enough, for even in resurrection there is order, even in glory there is grace. He ensures that the rising is as it was promised, not chaotic, but sacred. These are not just bodies returning to life. These are promises returning to fullness. Every tear once shed in faith, every prayer whispered in the night, they rise too. Not forgotten, not wasted. Michael does not touch them. He does not need to. He simply watches, his gaze as steady as the stars. He was there when they fell. He is here as they rise. The angel of war becomes the witness of rebirth. And in that watching, there is worship. He stands by the empty graves, the holy guardian of awakening, until the last of the faithful has stepped into the light, the new heaven, the new earth, and then it is done. The final war has been fought. The graves have given up their dead. The names in the book have been read aloud before the throne, and now, at last, the old passes away. A new heaven opens, not with thunder, but with stillness. A new earth appears, not carved from violence, but born from peace. The sky is no longer divided. The sea is no longer restless. And God dwells with his people once again. Michael, the archangel who once stood with a sword, no longer needs it. The blade is sheathed, the armor laid aside. There is no more need for defense, no more darkness to hold back. He has fulfilled his calling. He has stood at every gate, guarded every promise, fought every battle. Now he walks in peace, not with the stride of a conqueror, but with the calm of one who has seen the end and knows that it is good. The scales he once held are set down gently. The book he once guarded is now opened before all. There is no more war in his eyes, only rest, only light. The streets of the New Jerusalem shine beneath his feet. The river of life flows nearby. And, though the city does not need the sun, for the Lamb is its light, Michael stands in its radiance, not as a warrior, but as a witness. He does not speak. There is no need. The silence speaks for him. The peace is louder than any trumpet. The mission is complete. The battle finished. and the one who once stood in the shadow of swords now stands in the center of God's eternal light, at home forever. Chapter 17. A Legacy of Light. From the quiet days of ancient Israel to the echoing halls of distant cathedrals, the name of Michael has never faded. He walks through time not as a shadow, but as a light, a steady presence in the changing winds of history. When the first scrolls were written and prophets wept beside their visions, Michael was already there, not in every word, not in every verse, but woven softly between the lines. He did not need to be seen to be remembered. His presence was not loud. It was holy. The desert prophets spoke of heavenly beings with faces like lightning and feet like burning bronze. Among them one stood apart, the Archangel who did not fall, who did not falter. When Daniel trembled in his vision, Michael stood by his side. When nations rose and fell like the tides, Michael did not disappear. He stood watch as empires came and went, as temples were built and broken. He was never bound to one land. His legacy passed beyond Jerusalem's stones and into the mouths of travelers, the prayers of monks, the songs of the silent-hearted. In the cold stone of mountain-top shrines, in the warm breath of stories whispered by candlelight, Michael remained, not as myth, but as memory. And even when the world forgot many things, when kings changed names and faiths were reshaped, the memory of Michael held. He became the quiet companion of every age that longed for faith, a figure in the background of human hope. His name passed from generation to generation, carried not by force, but by faith. He was never a warrior of the past alone. He became a guardian for every age to come. Symbols in stone and song. There are places where his name is carved into stone, high above doors where people enter to pray. There are stained glass windows where his wings shine in morning light, and statues where his sword is lifted, not in violence, but in holy protection. The world did not forget him, it honored him, with art, with song, with sacred silence. Churches rise with his name carved into their very foundations. St. Michael, the protector, the watcher. Children are baptized beneath his painted image. Bells ring out in towns where his feast day is kept like a whispered promise. His name is written not just in books, but in the lives of those who still believe in the power of angels. Artists have painted him with fire in his eyes and peace in his stance. In cathedrals, his wings stretch from wall to wall, mighty, gentle, glorious, not as a god, but as a servant of the one true God. In songs, his name is carried on notes that reach toward heaven. From hymns of the early church to lullabies sung beside cradles, Michael's image has crossed cultures and time. In some places, children dress as him in golden fabric and feathered wings. In others, he is a name whispered over soldiers and a prayer said for protection. He has appeared on coins, on shields, on flags fluttering in the wind. And yet, through all of this, his purpose has remained unchanged, to guard, to guide, to glorify the Lord. The world has changed its language, its rulers, its ways. But it has not stopped painting Michael, It has not stopped praying his name, for he represents something more than any one time or culture. He reminds us that light, true light, is timeless. Reflected in the faithful Michael does not ask for praise. He does not stand in the center of worship. He stands beside it, reflecting glory back to God like the moon reflects the sun. His mission has never been to gather followers, but to point hearts upward to the Father of light, the Lord of hosts. And in his quiet example, he leaves something behind. Not just a memory, but a mirror. Those who walk in faith, who protect the vulnerable, who speak softly and stand firmly in love, they become like him. Not in appearance, not in name, but in spirit. A mother who prays for her children through the night. A man who forgives when he could fight. A stranger who shields the weak with nothing but kindness. These are the echoes of Michael's calling. These are the living legacies of the angel who stood with Daniel and who waits at the gates of the world to come. He leaves no written words, but his message is clear. Be faithful, be courageous, be humble. Not with shouts, but with steady strength. Not with fear, but with peace. Those who live this way become, in quiet truth, bearers of his light. And in that way, Michael's legacy lives not just in stone or scripture, but in the very breath of God's people, in the gentle courage of the faithful, in the hands that serve without being seen, in the hearts that shine without needing credit. Michael's legacy is not his alone. It is shared, passed down like a candle lit in the dark, one soul at a time, glowing with the glory of the God he serves. When we call his name, there are moments, quiet, heavy moments, when the world feels unkind, when fear settles like fog, and the heart wonders if hope still remains. In such times, the name Michael often rises like a prayer, not shouted, not begged, just spoken, a whisper between soul and sky. We do not call his name because we forget God. We call it because we remember what God has sent. We remember the promise that we are not alone, that there are messengers, watchers, warriors of light, and that one of them stands ever near. To say Michael is to remember strength, not the strength of swords, but of standing, of holding fast, of shining when all else grows dim. We call his name not to summon, but to remind. Each prayer, each quiet invocation is like a thread, tying us back to that great story unfolding in heaven. A child lights a candle before sleep, saying his name in wonder. An elder bows their head in silence, remembering his shield. A traveler on a long road calls out softly, just for comfort. These are not grand rituals. These are holy threads, tying heaven to earth, light to darkness, peace to chaos. Michael hears not with ears, but with purpose. He does not need words to know the heart. And though he does not always answer with signs, his presence is a gift, a peace that rests in the room like quiet wind. He was never meant to be the center of worship, only a reminder, a holy echo, a messenger of God's faithfulness through all generations, and so we call his name, not out of fear, but out of hope. Not to lift him high, but to lift our eyes to the one who sends him. For Michael is not the light, but he walks in it, he carries it, and by his legacy we are reminded that the light has never left us, not in the beginning, not now, not ever. Chapter 18. Sleep beneath the wings of Michael. The sky begins to darken. The edges of the horizon soften like the hem of a well-worn robe, and the golden light of day gently fades into the hush of twilight. All around, the world begins to slow. The birds grow quiet. The winds become still. Lamps flicker in homes as hearts prepare to rest. And in this sacred pause, as the day bows before the night, we remember the presence of the Archangel, not as a vision of battle, but as a guardian of peace. Michael, whose name once stirred images of celestial war, now stands not in fury, but in stillness. His sword, once lifted in the defense of heaven's order, now rests beside him. He does not need to fight tonight. The war is not here. Tonight, he watches, but not with tension or alarm. He watches with peace, a peace deep and old, the kind that stretches back to the first days when God breathed light into the darkness. His wings unfold slowly, wide and sheltering, stretching out over the slumbering earth like the arms of a father over his child. He is not far. He does not hide in the heights too distant to care. He is near. Near to the humble, near to the weary, near to those who lie down in hope and rise up in faith. And as the stars begin to pierce the sky, Michael remains, not as a tale forgotten, but as a comfort remembered. He is part of the quiet. He is part of the light that lingers even as the sun has gone. The Lord has sent his angels to guard his beloved, and Michael, the captain of them all, takes his place in the silence of night. There is no reason to fear, not tonight. The shadows may stretch, but they do not reach beyond God's will. And in this sacred evening, Michael stands gently by, sword sheathed, wings wide, as heaven keeps watch over the world below. Prayers in the dark. The night deepens, curtains are drawn, and the final candle flickers. A child turns in her bed, a mother closes her eyes, a traveler lies beneath the sky. And from each heart rises a prayer, sometimes spoken, sometimes silent, sometimes so soft it barely has sound, but heaven hears it all. Defend us in battle, some whisper, repeating words they learned long ago. Yet the battles now are quieter. They are not against fire or flood, but against restlessness, loneliness, weariness. Still the prayer rises and Michael hears, not because he needs many words, but because he responds to hearts that hope. He does not wait for grand gestures or perfect phrases. He listens to the ache behind the breath, to the longing carried in silence. Even in the dark, even when our eyes close and our voices trail away, he remains. Attentive, gentle, constant. Prayer in the night is not a performance. It is not about being loud or clever. It is the soul reaching up, even half asleep, to say, "Stay with me," And the answer comes not in thunder, but in nearness. Michael draws close, not with noise, but with nearness. He does not interrupt our thoughts, he joins them. He does not stop our dreams, he guards them. He is a holy presence in the quiet spaces. A reminder that no moment is too small to matter to God, no sigh too soft to be heard by heaven. And as the prayers rise, soft, unfinished, drifting, they find their way home. Angels move unseen and Michael leads them still. Not as a warrior tonight, but as a keeper of peace, carrying each longing like a candle in the dark. In the shelter of wings, there is a promise tucked into the Psalms, a quiet line that many have whispered in their time of need. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. These are not idle words, they are true. They are alive. In the stillness of night, that refuge becomes real. For though we sleep, the heavens do not. Michael, one among many, remains strongest in the shadows. He does not fear the dark, he stands in it, guarding those who cannot see, watching over those who cannot yet understand the battles unfolding in spirit. Under his wings there is no weight, only warmth, only shelter. As the body grows still and the breath slows, dreams begin to stir. Soft pictures rising from within, guided gently by peace. Michael does not shape them. He shields them. Not even the smallest child sleeps alone. The wings of an angel do not need to be seen to be real. They are not bound by time or space. They are near when they are needed. And Michael, protector of the people of God, stretches his shelter wide. His presence is not loud. It does not wake. It calms. It settles. It steadies the soul. The shadows may linger, but they do not touch what God has guarded. For even in darkness, light is not far. Even in sleep, the soul is not alone. Michael stands, not above, but beside, with the patience of one who knows that night is just a passage, not a place to fear. And so we sleep, not unaware, but at peace, in the shelter of wings, in the nearness of God's protection, in the quiet, holy strength of an angel who knows how to wait in silence until morning comes. Night is not an end. It is not a defeat or a fading. It is a bridge, a soft and sacred road from one day to the next. And though the world grows still, it is only for a time. Morning will come again. The light will return. The sun will rise just as it has every day since the first dawn God called good. But until then, Michael stands. He does not slumber. He does not grow weary. He has watched over the ages. He has guarded kings and prophets, children and wanderers. And now he guards you. His wings remain.
Open, his eyes do not close.
He stands at the edge of the bed beside the window, over the city, beneath the sky. Wherever the faithful lie down, he is near. Not because of who we are, but because of who God is. And the night, once feared, becomes soft. It becomes safe. The shadows stretch, but they carry no threat. They are only part of the passage. The moon glows like a lamp set in heaven. The stars sing songs too quiet for ears, but not for souls. Peace begins to fall. not like thunder, but like soft rain. It does not startle. It settles. It finds the corners of the heart that have grown restless, and it fills them with quiet. Michael does not speak, but his silence is full of purpose, full of peace. And as you sleep, you are not alone. Heaven watches. Angels move. And the one who once stood before the dragon now stands beside your dreams. Not in armor, but in love, rest comes. The night deepens, but even in sleep you are held. You are safe. You sleep beneath the wings of one who knows the way through darkness. And when morning comes, as it always does, light will return. But for now, rest. For now, be still. The sick guardian watches, peace remains, and the love of God covers all.